Hi, I'm Zoe Starr, and welcome to my show. And I'm Paranormal Extraction. We have Sean Straney on today, the historian, and he's also a paranormal investigator. And of course, this is one of my favorite subjects because he's going to be talking about discerning the differences between shadow people, dark elves, and evil entities. I love this kind of stuff. All right. Hey, Sean, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I know we're going to be talking about some of my favorite subjects. So, why don't we? Is there anything that you want to say about what you do or how you are or where people can find you first?
Well, pretty much I just have a Facebook page. I am actually working on a book about Mandela Effect to explain it more
Sure.
in scientific terms. It's something that's in progress. I do believe that there is a valid theoretical physics explanation for Mandela Effect.
Wow, very good. Okay, so why don't we start off with shadow people because um, when we talked before, I was like crazy on that subject. So, what are your feelings about shadow people?
Well, shadow people has become kind of a catch-all term as of late for basically anything that is a dark amorphous mass that looks vaguely human.
Right.
But I was fascinated with the original reports of shadow people, which had a very distinctive description. And people can go back and listen to archives of the Art Bell Show, Coast to Coast AM, and listen to these descriptions. The original shadow people description, they looked exactly like a sharply defined shadow like you would cast on a wall on a sunny day.
Right. So
You could
not
see,
all blurry like a lot of them look now is what you're saying.
right, right. And what fascinated me about that was as people reported them, they seemed to be very mundane shadows doing mundane things like walking down the street with a briefcase. Uh,
Wow.
this one, yeah,
What?
this one woman described an outline of a briefcase, and she said it looked like a businessman that appeared, walked across her lawn to the middle of the road, and then disappeared and looked like he was carrying a briefcase. And I was thinking that the original shadow people descriptions might be where the veil between our dimension and a parallel dimension that's in the same space we are gets
Exactly.
thin, and we see the shadows of people in that other dimension.
Right. Well, things have gotten kind of out of control with the paranormal, and shadow people are more demonic, okay, uh, is what, they're described as now, okay. So what you're talking about is from history, okay, starting from whenever you were, these shadow people were completely different. They weren't malevolent, right? They were
Right.
just
The
showing up.
the actual shadow people, when you see an actual shadow person, it looks like an everyday person, except it's black. It looks like a shadow you would cast on the wall. Very sharply outlined. You can see the shape of the nose of the person if they're sideways. You can see what they're wearing, what they're carrying by their outline.
Wow.
But I think a lot of paranormal shows have gotten so wrapped up in the clickbait, in the views, in the sensationalism that they've moved away from actual investigation into more sensationalism. But in a way, it's still important because you still have malevolent entities, these unclean spirits
Yeah.
that sometimes can be people that have past that have had unhealthy lifestyles when they were alive. They have not crossed over. Um, they can actually be demonic entities. If you go through like the Quran and Middle Eastern literature, they could be uh, jinn or genies.
Yeah.
And genies are that is an entire subject in and of itself. I find fascinating, but it's kind of good they bring about an awareness of these malevolent beings or unclean spirits because that's where the real danger is.
Right. Okay. But what you're saying is that before they would just be seen walking down the street and they weren't considered to be scary or, demonic. And
No, the original shadow people weren't. It was like being able to see partially into a parallel dimension
okay,
that
so
coexists with all.
what is going on now? Why did they change from that to this other thing?
Well, once the movement got out, or once the topic, kind of broke into the public eye, uh, mostly through the old Art Bell show about shadow people kind of just started lumping everything together as shadow people. Anything that was dark or black and had a vaguely humanoid shape, they would say, "Oh, it's a shadow person," and that's it. Just kind of got lumped in together. It's kind of like,
Well, they also said that they have red eyes. Okay.
yeah, they've said that too, but it's kind of like, think of it this way: all five digits on my hand are fingers, but only one is a thumb. So
Okay.
what they did was they said, okay, here's a thumb, but it's a finger, so all the fingers are now included.
Okay. All right. So now, in your opinion, they are demonic.
Well, I think demonic beings or malevolent or unclean beings are considered shadow people,
Okay.
but they're different than actual shadow people.
Okay.
And they are a bigger threat.
Okay. So what would you consider one of those if it's not a shadow person? Because shadow people are huge. Okay. Um, I've had somebody on that wrote a book about it, and I mean they're huge. So and every single one every person I've talked to, and the ones that I have seen are dangerous. They're dangerous. So why could they be so like nice or whatever, and now they're dangerous? You're saying that they're a totally
No,
different thing now. They're a different
I'm
lump.
just saying that the term shadow people has expanded to encompass a whole spectrum of beings.
Oh, okay. I get you. I get you. So if someone sees a shadow person, generally what I've seen is that there's a human figure, but it's not on an outline like you discussed in the beginning. It's more kind of just like a shadow, but kind of on. It's not, you know, like what you said before, defined, as a person.
Right. That gets lumped in with shadow people now, but just like I said, the terms expanded to fulfill a whole spectrum of uh, different manifestations. But the ones that are kind of amorphous or have the glowing red eyes, those are unclean spirits or evil entities, and they have a reason for doing that because if they create fear in a person,
Oh yeah.
that fear, the fight or flight response kicks in. They start producing adrenaline. Their their aura actually expands and becomes supercharged, and these entities feed off that energy.
We
So they
absolutely,
scare
I
you just to
absolutely
feed off
agree.
you.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree. And well, in my experiences, they're more demonic on the demonic side, the ones that I've met. But if you have holes in your aura, that is how they enter. I'm going to give you an example. Let's just use somebody who is an alcoholic. Um, Being an alcoholic creates holes in your aura. Okay. So those beings have an entrance to come in because you're not spiritually protected and you're using, let's say, drugs or alcohol, or it could be anything. So they're drawn to those people that are that way, okay? Because they want to live out the same feeling that they left the earth and have not gone or crossed over. So they come into the person, okay, let's just say an alcoholic, and we start off with infestation, oppression, and then they finally possession, okay? So they can actually come in and take over your body if you're not going to cleanse it out. Now, when they do that, Sean, it's interesting because they will make that person, okay, alcoholic or drug addict, want more, and more. So let's say the guy's drinking, a 12 pack of, high octane beer a day or a bottle of vodka. Pretty soon he's going to be up to two bottles of vodka. Okay. Because this entity or shadow being, demonic is what I would call it, wants to take over. And then, of course, that's when the exorcism comes in. Okay. So that's kind of my thoughts on what they do. Okay. These
Well,
demonic.
that's very accurate. And part of being able to drink more is the physical body does build up a tolerance, but what you'll sometimes see in news stories, specifically with alcohol, is they will have somebody who was drunk driving, they get breathalyzed by the police, and their blood alcohol content is at a lethal level, but they are alive and
Yes.
driving.
Yes. And that is
And
because of the
right, that
that we're
tells me
going in,
that something is inside of them.
we
Something is possessing them.
well, yeah, they're possessed. And then, even like, let's just say they're possessed, right? Exorcism would be great, but a lot of people, they don't do that. Okay. They don't believe in that. So they quit drinking, right? Which puts that entity, demonic thing at bay, but it's waiting, Sean. It's waiting for you to just pick up another drink. It never leaves. It keeps an eye on you. I'm not saying that it could go to a different person, okay? But it's waiting. And what happens, okay, through my experience in talking to people, is that the drinking, that if they stopped and they start again, is like tripled the amount. They might just start off with one glass of wine. They maybe drank 2 bottles, but they immediately go into more than they did before.
Well, that's very reasonable. Think about somebody who has actually passed, they haven't crossed over,
Exactly.
and they were an alcoholic. They can't actually get that alcohol high anymore if they don't have a
Right.
physical body. So they find somebody who's weak, who has holes in their aura.
Yep.
They enter them, get them to drink, and
Yep.
basically it's a malevolent entity living vicariously through that person.
Absolutely.
And like
I agree
and like
100%.
they say in in like Alcoholics Anonymous, I actually used to work at a dual diagnosis facility, so I'm familiar with the 12 steps and all that. One drink is one drink too many, but one more is never enough.
Yeah, yeah,
That entity controlling the body of the living person.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. So we've covered kind of shadow beings, I think, which I really liked. Okay, and we said it in a short amount of time, but I think we brought through what it is that we wanted to talk about. So the thing that I'm not so sure about is these dark elves. Okay, I I don't know about dark elves. So what are dark elves?
Not a lot of people do know about them. I stumbled across them by accident because a house that I was renting had uh, had a basement that was very well lit. There was the original incandescent bulbs in the basement. There were a total of 6 fluorescent light fixtures in the basement, but the basement always seemed rather dark.
Right.
And let me add to that that the walls were painted like a semi-gloss ghost gray. So the walls would not be absorbing light, they'd be reflecting light. So the basement should have been pretty bright. And I began noticing every once in a while I would see shadows out of the corner of my eye in different parts of the house. And so I began doing a little bit of research, and I ended up discovering that in Nordic mythology and Germanic mythology, they have fey creatures like almost every culture does, but they have what they call dark elves.
Wow.
And dark elves were associated with the element of earth, and they typically lived in root cellars.
Interesting.
And you could tell if you had dark elves on your property in your root cellar or whatever, because no matter back in those days, no matter how many torches you brought into a root cellar, it would just seem the darkness would swallow that light up. Now, dark elves they're not dangerous, they're not threatening, but according to Nordic lore and Germanic lore, they're somewhat xenophobic. They don't like their space invaded. They don't even like other fey creatures that much. They don't hate them. They're not a negative being, but they like their solitude. So what they tend to do is they tend to try and make a place seem very, very dark, and they try to make, uh, as far as living people go, feel uncomfortable. Okay. Because they want them to leave. Now, from my experience, they weren't making me feel uncomfortable in the whole house. Just when I went down to the basement to use the washing machine and the dryer, because that was their space. They're associated with the earth. They like cellars. They like basements.
I had somebody on that I interviewed about that. He called them, I think, the elementals.
Well, they are part of the earth elementals, but they're part of the fey realm as well.
Okay.
And like I said, they're not harmful. They are just kind of xenophobic. They want to make you feel uncomfortable. They won't hurt you or anything like that.
So what do they look like? I mean, how does someone decide they're called dark elves? Are they like small trollish looking or something? I mean,
they will just appear as dark shadows, as if you're looking at a room that's well lit and you see one spot that looks kind of dark.
Okay.
Like the light is being absorbed in that area.
Okay.
You won't actually see like an outline of a shadow or anything. You'll just see like a dark spot. Then you probably have dark elves.
Okay, so they're like small then. A small dark spot.
Well, they can be anywhere from human size and a little bit bigger to about being the size of a cat.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. So they're not interested in anything other than they just want their space. Can they create havoc if their space is interrupted?
No, they just, from all the literature I've studied uh, in both the Nordic and Germanic traditions, they don't do any poltergeist activity, anything like that. They just kind of project an aura to make you feel uncomfortable and want to leave their area. That's
Right.
all they really do.
Well, when I was growing up, we had a basement, and what you're talking about is exactly um, how I felt when I went down there. Exactly. And what you're saying is exactly what I experienced. So if this happens, Sean, how do we get rid of them?
It's there's really no reason to get rid of them.
Well,
Just kind of
if you don't want to go down there and you're scared and you want to, like, what I used to do is race down into the basement and grab what we needed, and I would be like running and then run back up the stairs.
well,
So,
what I would do is I would just think very hard, almost project trying to project my thoughts. Uh, I respect your space. I'm not here to interfere with you.
okay, great.
Just, let me do my thing. I'll let you do your thing. And I would see them up in the house from time to time and felt like they were just watching what I was doing. And we basically had a peace after that. I no
Wow.
longer had uncomfortable feelings going down in the basement because, hey, that's their space. I have to go down there to do my laundry, but I'm in and out. Leave them alone. They left me alone because they're not evil. They're not part of the unseelie court. They are just, kind of xenophobic. They want their space and they don't want anybody else in it.
Right. Well, that makes sense from what I've heard about elementals. But for me, I mean, I didn't even know at that young age, because you see so many things when you're into this stuff and then it's real, that, that would be the procedure for me to do. So the fear, of course, is they're making that and they're feeding off that to make you more fearful about going down there to protect their space, right?
Right. They're trying to push you out of their space. But like I said, once I kind of projected those thoughts of, hey, I'll leave you alone. You please leave me alone. I'm not going to interfere with you. It the bad feelings in the basement stopped. I knew they were down there. I would see shadows out of the corner of my eye. I knew they were down there, but they no longer tried to make me feel uncomfortable and tried to push me away.
Okay.
We basically, we had a,
An agreement.
we recognized each other, expressed that mutual respect, and that was that.
Well, that's so important, and just not with the dark elves, but with, everything else that we're talking about too. Is, I always say, or even with the demonic presence or anything like that, I say, you cannot come into my space. You cannot come into my space. You cannot come into my head, my home, or anywhere. You need to leave and do your own thing, okay? Because you're not welcome here. I respect you, but you need to leave. And a lot of paranormal people, they don't do that. They want to prove whatever. And, that can be really dangerous. Okay. Doesn't sound like that with the dark elves. That would be more like a shadow person or a evil entity. But I think that applies to many things, and that is respect. It's basically having respect.
Well, with unclean spirits, with evil entities, there's no compromise as far as I'm concerned. I'm either going to have an exorcism, I'm going to be smudging with white sage, I'm doing whatever because an evil entity is an invader into your space.
Oh,
They're
oh yeah.
they're an invader and they need to leave.
Yeah. Um,
And it's kind of interesting. There was a diary that was found at a haunted site. It's one we've talked about before. And it was a group of Mennonites had moved into this area. And they found a diary, and this woman is putting in her diary how the men started drinking. They started getting violent.
Wow.
They were not going to church as much. The women couldn't get them to go to church as much. That is the danger of unclean spirits, because it goes step by step and creeps up on you,
Well,
and you don't know it until it's too late.
It's IOP, infestation, oppression, and possession. So that's what I think. But I have a very interesting story about, if we're talking about demonic stuff. I worked with a shaman for years in the paranormal, but we didn't believe in going out and finding evidence. So we would go into a restaurant, or someone would call us, and we believed in going in and getting rid of them. Okay. We called ourselves more like light workers. Unfortunately, the shaman died, but this is really bizarre, Sean. Okay. So, a couple of years have passed, and I haven't done a lot of paranormal stuff because I don't have my shaman. Okay. And you can't just go find a shaman that's from, the res. You can't. Okay. You can't do it. It's very rare. So I haven't really found anybody that has that similar experience. Anyways, we used to do a procedure, and there was some demonic stuff going on in our home. I don't know how it was brought in or what it was. I didn't get a chance to really think about that. But I immediately got Palo Santo out. Okay, Palo Santo is part of the process of what we would do. Okay, as we would use white sage, that's to get rid of the negative energy. We would use the Palo Santo to get rid of the demonic energy or any demons. And then we would use sweetgrass to pull in the the good spirits. Well, I just got out my Palo Santo, and I didn't do the full cleansing. And Sean, oh my God, I pissed off this demon so bad that all of a sudden the fan in the kitchen over the stove would not stop, could not stop it. And I'm going in there going, something's wrong with the microwave. I can't get this And then the meter for carbon monoxide started beeping at the same time. Dee gets up there, takes the battery out, and it continues to beep. Then we had something in the washer, and the washer started making all this noise, and our washer was destroyed. And I'm sitting there thinking, Dee's like going, what the hell is going on in our house? And I'm like, man, I don't know. What is going on? I mean, I used Palo Santo this morning. I don't understand it. And Sean, I thought about it the next day, and I went, you know what? I didn't go through the full process. I just pissed it off is what I did. I pissed the MF off. And so I went back to my original shaman teaching of what we did, and did the process, which takes a while. Okay. And I'm telling you, it was gone. It was gone. It was gone. So, yeah, we just had that experience like 2 weeks ago. But I do need to think, now that we're talking about it, where did this come from? Okay. It's gone now, but I mean, come on, a meter, the carbon monoxide, not the meter that says there's smoke, the carbon monoxide meter was. So I'm calling around, and they're saying, open all your windows. They come and they're like, we don't know what's going on, but they ended up getting it fixed. We have no washer. We have to get a brand new one. What we had to do with the stove is he unplugged it and plugged it back in, and it worked. So, and then I did the full on process, and it was gone. That's just a little short story about how powerful these things are and what kind of process, uh, in my own personal experience, that you have to go through in order to completely cleanse that horrific demon away and out. Just a story for you.
Well, this is a thing I always wonder about with the amateur ghost hunters. Not that I'm necessarily a professional ghost hunter, but at least I know that before I go do something, I have to make sure that my spiritual aura is
Damn
full,
good. Yes.
complete. And
Yes.
then whenever I finish wherever I'm at, I need to, make sure I'm not bringing residual energy out.
That's right.
And I know enough to do that because, I was my grandparents on my mother's side were old school Irish. They believed in fairies and elves and all that stuff and everything. I mean, they were Catholic, but they also believed in fairies, elves, and my grandfather taught me how to douse.
Right.
So they also had that old school, thought with them as well. And so a lot of these guys, they go in, and I'm very scientific minded. I like having equipment. I like gathering data. I like trying to analyze the data. But these guys go in and have all their equipment, but they've done nothing to protect themselves spiritually.
Oh my God, that was our biggest thing. And, when we were posting and stuff like that, I mean, paranormal investigators did not like us because we were adamant about spiritual protection. And we would see like them getting scratched and stuff like that. And we're going, oh my God, I mean, what are they doing for spiritual protection? They never mention it, and it's like, then you can carry that home as an attachment. And I've had that happen to me under, experiences that I've had because I wasn't ready for it. Okay. It just, someone needed help right away, so I wasn't able to do my whole process in the morning and wear all my onyx and all the stuff that I do before. And yeah, they can come in and man, woo, they can make you do some really weird stuff. So, yeah, I would have to say that is the number one thing that I am adamant about. And you don't see a lot of that with these newbies that go out. Like I was at hairdressers and someone, I've seen you on Paranormal, on the Travel Channel. Oh my God, guess what? We just went out and bought some equipment. We're just going to go into a haunted place and just start. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. And it's like, what do you say at that point? I say, well, just make sure you use spiritual protection. They don't even know about that. They're just so hyper about using their equipment. And so I just have to let it go. I'm just like, I just have to let it go. It's just become a craze and it's ridiculous.
Well, everybody's gotten so wrapped up in, like I always say, the clickbait. They want something sensational to get the likes, to get the subscriptions. They're more concerned with the sensationalism, never realizing they're putting themselves in jeopardy. Now, with me being, having been raised Christian and everything, my thing is I spend time in prayer.
Right.
I will wear a cross.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got tons of stuff that I wear. So do I.
And I pray afterwards. And that is my way of protecting myself. But I know that if you're not protected and if you're not spiritually whole, something can latch onto you and it can start preying on you. And you won't know it till it's too late, until you're having chaos and destruction and everything else going on.
Yeah, that's why I'm telling you, when that stuff started happening, I knew immediately. Most people would be like, oh, we're just having bad luck. What's going on? No, I knew, Sean. And it was like, okay, it was just bizarre because I'm thinking to myself, where in the hell did this come from? I don't know. Maybe it's because I do voodoo. Sean, tell me about evil entities. I mean, I think we're on that same subject of because we just went through the Dark Elves.
With evil entities, sometimes they can be people that were evil in life and refused to cross over. A good example is there was a custodian at Penhurst, and a lot of investigators that have gone to Penhurst have picked up on him. But he also was very, very cruel and used to torture the patients.
Yeah.
And he stays in the basement and he wants to torture people that come in to do paranormal investigation.
Yeah, I've seen the scratches and all that stuff on that.
And it's easily seeable because Penhurst wasn't just an insane asylum. Penhurst was built during the eugenics period where they were putting people that were quote unquote feeble-minded into institutions.
Yeah. Oh my God.
They did not consider good genetic stock.
Oh my God, I know all about that. I mean, back then, okay, they used to go into, you could be institutionalized for anything, okay? And they would just put you there and forget your family, put you there. I don't remember what era this was in or the dates or anything like that, but, and then perform just horrific things. And they would be, some of them would be normal people that their families just thought maybe one of the things that they were doing, they were crazy and were put in there. It's just horrific what was done in those places.
Well, eugenics was popular in the 1920s. In the early 30s, it was declared bunk science here in America. But up until the 70s, they still had these asylums. And
yes,
like Penhurst, the one in Kentucky, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's one in Kentucky. It was the same thing. It was originally an institution for the feeble-minded. And the thing was, like there's people that live in the mountains of Virginia, the original, hillbillies, as they were called. And they live very simple lives. It's just their culture. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just they believe in a very simple life. And in the 1920s, the sheriffs and the deputies would go up and round up older teens and young men and women and bring them into town, bring them to the hospital, and involuntarily sterilize them because they were quote unquote bad genetic stock.
Oh my God.
And they would go conduct raids. And they did the same thing here in the Midwest into the Ozarks. They'd go round these people up. These people weren't stupid. They lived off the land and were successful farmers and animal husbandry far beyond what most people could do. Okay. But because they had a different lifestyle, they were considered simple-minded, and well, we need to involuntarily sterilize them so they don't produce more bad genetic stock.
Okay, well,
it was the eugenics movement that actually led to Hitler.
Okay, I just have a question on that, but could that be because of interbreeding? That they came up there and took them away because they were interbreeding with like their sister and their brother? Like
that interbreeding did happen from time to time, usually among cousins because it was such a small community. Sometimes it'd be unavoidable, but it wasn't so rampant like you hear stories of.
Okay.
It does happen because it's a small and limited gene pool community, but it's not like it was the norm. It was something that would eventually, a couple generations down the road, basically be unavoidable.
Right. So they took these feeble-minded in there and they tortured them and performed experiments on them. That's what I know.
Well, the biggest problem, like with Pennhurst, was by the 1950s, there was almost 100 patients per staff person. They couldn't care for them all. So
Well,
they would
yeah.
basically put diapers on a lot of them and chain them to their beds
Yes.
and that kind of thing. But you also had people that got in that industry that had a evil predatory mindset, like the custodian at Pennhurst, that would go and torture these disadvantaged people because that's how they felt powerful, was by harming and torturing others. And they would get away with it because there wasn't even enough staff, an eye on staff. Sure, they weren't doing improper things.
Well, the one that I went and worked on, it was so horrific, Sean, that they died, okay, and they made the other, well, inmates or whatever you want to call them, do the burials. And they would put them in cardboard boxes and they would stack them on top of each other. And so that they had no grave markers, and because I did a lot of historical research on it, and when they came in later on, of course, when it closed down and they were going to go through and rebuild on it, when they were using the bulldozers, all of a sudden all of these bodies in cardboard were coming up. So the historical society came in and said, this is a historical site. We need to find these people from the records and do, I mean, they really went out with the bones and this and that on finding who these people were and giving them a proper burial. However, there was hundreds that they still could not do that with. And it was so sad. I mean, can you
Yeah,
imagine?
well, they were
Imagine,
they were the rejects of society,
it's just
and
horrible.
so they were basically thrown into unmarked paupers' graves,
Yes.
stacked on top of one
Yes.
another, just because they had to dispose of the body. Uh, and they didn't have crematoriums, or I think maybe one or two had crematoriums, but it wasn't typical. So they would just they used to do this with prisoners too. There's a section of a cemetery down by Huntsville, Texas, and all there are these small granite stones about 4 inches by 4 inches to mark that there's a grave there, but that's the only marking. And they were prisoners that died in the Huntsville prison that were just thrown into these graves. And
Well,
they basically
the
got
same thing happened
pauper graves.
up at the Clown Motel when we did the Travel Channel. There's a graveyard there, okay? And, anyways, if you do your research, it's really interesting because there was a lot of Chinese or Asian people that were there during, the back in the 1800s or whatever, that were dying, okay? And so they have a graveyard, and down in the bottom they just buried them all, no markers, nothing. So here we go again, the bulldozers come in to because there was a community above of trailers that wanted to expand, and they just started, these graves just started coming up, coming up, coming up, shut down again. Nothing was done about it other than they don't know who they are or whatever. And no one knows about this when they go up there, very few people. But yeah, so the whole bottom of, you go into the pit after the cemetery, it's all buried with all these, you know, Chinese or whatever you want to call them. It's
So
Asian, the Asians. It's just horrible.
a lot of Chinese people came over on indentured servitude and worked on the railways as the
That's
railroads were expanding
that's
toward the west.
that's what it was for.
And,
Yeah.
and when
They
they
were
didn't get paid
mining.
much of anything, they got like maybe a bowl of rice a day. And when they died on the job, being out in the heat, being malnourished, being dehydrated, they would just pick a spot up on a hill somewhere and start burying the bodies up there,
Yeah.
didn't mark it. There's probably still undiscovered graves in the West, in the desert.
Well, of course there is. And until they start taking those bulldozers in, they're never going to know if they're there or not, and this is happening more and more and more as we expand. Okay. Our cities. So it's coming on more and more. Wow. Okay. So this has been a fantastic discussion. I think we've nailed it, and gotten through this very easily and effortlessly without, going on and on and on and on about this stuff. Is there anything that you want to close? Yeah.
If I could offer a word of warning to anybody who's watching this, especially if they want to be a ghost hunter or they want to investigate paranormal stuff, as we talked about, a being can enter a hole in your aura and they start taking control and eventually go on to full possession. And it happens over time and you don't notice it till it's too late.
Sure.
I would say if your friends start telling you,
Yeah.
hey, something's changed about you,
Yeah.
do not blow it off. Stop and listen to them and wonder if you brought something home with you. Because if your behavior is changing to your friends,
Yes.
something else is starting to oppress you and is eventually wants to possess you.
Right.
And you
So
need to take care of that.
If anyone wants to find out, because I'm not going to go into the definition of it all, it's called IOP. So just put in on Google, what does IOP mean in hauntings, or what does IOP mean in the paranormal, and it'll all come up and it'll explain. I even have a big page about it. So I might just reply and put that page on there so people can see what it means and have that definition. I think it's really, really important so they understand, because it'll give them exactly what's happening through each process of this being coming through you. So yes, I do agree with you that they need to be very careful, and that we talked about the spiritual side, and that's the most important. And I'm really glad that we're on the same page. And that's why I do pre-interviews, Sean, because you're great. We believe a lot, and you know more on the historical point of view on how far back this goes on, and I don't really know a lot of that. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and doing your kind of historical, paranormal researcher, experience today, to kind of give people a little bit of a different, outlook, hopefully, on not becoming possessed.
Well, I believe it was Aristotle that said the first step of wisdom is knowing what you don't know. And there is so much that we don't know about our universe from a physics point. I mean, we're discovering new things about quantum physics every day. We know that quantum physics and human consciousness now have interactions with each other, which we're still trying to understand. We don't know everything there is about the spiritual world,
Right.
And you have to be willing to say, I don't know everything, so I have to protect myself.
There you go.
And those around me.
Yep, love it for the ending of this. Just absolutely love it. So I just want to say I really want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I look forward to having you on again. And so I'm going to say thank you, Sean, for coming on. And
thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure as always.
Thank you. I want to let you guys know that this is very important stuff that we're speaking about today, and something that I highly believe in and am really into. So please listen and do your research. All right. Okay. So I'm going to say bye. Thank you for watching. Bye, Sean.
Bye-bye. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, you too.